Alright, class, I have a setup with different paints to talk to you about real quick, and then we'll get into how you can make texture as well as how you make your scale of colors. Different yellows and blues and things come at the store. I just want you to be aware that you want to get one probably get one that says something like primary. You can get other ones such as cadmium yellow light, but that'll have a bit of a green undertone. That's fine to use. It's really bright yellow. Or if you have an idea for a composition that would need a darker one, there's like ochres and things. In blues, you have the same thing going on. You're going to get a chance you could use a cerulean, which has got a bit of a reddish to it, a green red. Ultramarine, which is a really red undertone, or phthalo blue, which has a green undertone. This brings up my point though. If I use phthalo blue, which has a green undertone, and also cadmium yellow light, which has a green undertone, then together they'll work really well because they'll get really bright colors. But if I say switch to using more of a primary yellow or one of these yellow ochres, or actually the example would be better this way. If I use the ultramarine blue, which has a red undertone, and cadmium yellow light, which is kind of a cooler, greener undertone, they're going to make muddier colors with each other because the red in this one and the green in this one are going to counteract each other and won't be as bright of colors. So you're going to want to think about that when you buy your paint. Okay. Basics is a good brand for regular good student quality, but you could get other ones like these folk art ones. They just won't cover as well, and then there's even more expensive paints as well. So to do your texture sheets, you're going to want to assemble some different things. Some of it is, of course, sheets of paper. I talk about using quarter sheets of paper. What I did was just take drawing paper and cut it up. I'm going to texture these. This is just regular Strathmore style drawing paper. You can do also the project using Bristol board too. It's harder to cut up for the collages, but this would be good to put your design on because it's thicker. You could paste the other sheets onto it a lot easier. Some students at times don't want to do collage, like this is a collage version of the project. I don't know if you can, let me see if you can see that better. Or they cut it out and put it together. They used Bristol and it made it kind of difficult for them. But it works pretty well. They actually did a lot of black and white, which I don't want you to do, so it's not a great example for that reason. But other students don't like the idea of a collage, so they actually have done it all directly onto the paper. The problem with that is you end up with pencil showing through sometimes, and it's harder to control the little details. But it can work fine. This person did the same thing with like sponging and things. The problem with this also is it's too tempting to end up getting into this ombre effect for blending. And the project is just like the value project where I want you to have clear lines of where the color is, so it's a specific thing. This one feels really unfinished. I didn't do anything with the background, but it's starting to be something interesting. So let's talk about how you make texture. Firstly, you're going to want to have your color of paint that you're going to use. You're going to want to have some type of piece, a plate or something you can use as a palette. I'm just going to use a disposable paper plate because I figure you can all get those somewhere. You want to have some brushes, of course, which there's different styles. You already have some from the last project, rounds or small round ones are nice. This is called a filbert. It's a little bit bigger. It works pretty well for certain things. And then you get some flat brushes. You may want to have a palette knife so you can mix your paint together. You don't have to. And then you may want to have some additional sort of unusual tools that you can use to create texture. So I have Q-tips. The palette knife will also work to add texture. And then I have a comb to show you. And then I have some foil, or you can use saran wrap. And then just the paper towel. You're going to want to have some paper towels or something, which they're in a premium right now, aren't they? Okay, so each sheet, you're going to want to have the one color. It can be with white or black added to it, but to make it different darkness than straight out of the tube. You don't want it straight out of the tube. But I don't want to have a sheet with yellow and red on there. I want it to be all one tone. Now, you're going to want to make your sheets based on your design. So if you had an idea for this type of a design, then you're going to want to make some sheets that are green with yellow, pure green, blue, texture sheets, some red, orange, and yellow ones, right? So you're going to kind of want to do this after you have somewhat of an idea of your design, because you're going to use these sheets to create the project. Okay? So let's get started here and see what we can do. I'm going to shake up the paint. This is cadmium red light. It's kind of a orangey-ish to the red rather than a blue. It's on the yellower side of red. Now I'm going to also add some, I need to get some water here real quick, so let me do that. I'm going to add a little bit of white onto my palette so I can use it to make a little bit of a less bright color if I decide. Maybe kind of pinky orange. And I might add a tiny bit of black just in case. I want to add a darker color. I can use these, I'll use these as well for the demonstration on the value steps. But hopefully this is coming across well. It's hard to do this by a video. It's unusual. I'm set up in my own made home recording studio. So you're going to want to try to experiment with different methods of doing this. Okay? And the water is just to clean your brushes out. So let's start with just straight up dry brushing. Okay, dry brushing is the idea is when you don't have very much paint on your brush. Just a little bit. So it's a kind of dry brush. And when you put it on there, some of the white of the paper will show through and change the color. And it gives it a texture too. Now depending on which way you do the stroke, it'll give it a different feeling to the paper. It's texture. So I would create a texture over this whole sheet that's the same. So I have a smallish brush here, and it's actually, I'm doing it on purpose because I can get a different feel. If I use a bigger brush, then the strokes would be bigger and the texture would change slightly. Alright? So I'll go over the whole sheet like this. You're going to want to work on some type of newspaper or something you have to keep it from ruining your work surface. I just have it on an extra drawing board that I have, so I can work without worrying about going over the edge. And I can do the strokes really specific direction, which I want to be clear on what I'm purposely trying to do. Or if I wanted to, I could go all over and kind of have a pattern that's going that way as well. But texture has a sort of relationship to pattern in some way, and that's kind of what I'm trying to show you on this. Now, I don't want to go back in here and start adding blue on here. That's not the purpose of this. Every section has to be the same whole color family. But I could, if I wanted to, add some red with white, the same type of red, and that would change the color quite a bit. But as long as it's consistent across the surface. It's already sort of happening anyway, though, because of the red of the white of the paper is making it like that. But that would kind of make it more complex. And if I wasn't just going to do red, I could blend, if I'm going to make oranges more orange, I would add yellow to it and make my own colors. I'm not just going to use the colors, all the colors straight out of the tube. I'm just doing this to give you examples of type of texture you could create. Okay, so that's the kind of dry brushing, and you can see that I'm building up texture like that. But I don't want to just focus only on one type, so I'm going to put this aside, and we can work on another way of doing it. Put this down on the ground here. Alright. I had also some of these other tools, so I want to show you sort of some of them, the way they'll affect it. So if you had, this is a Q-tip, right? And if you did this, you could do something really interesting with a Q-tip. See how I'm building up a texture? That's a different type of effect because it's a different thing to apply the paint with. And I could make a whole sheet like this. And I'm going to think about using strokes and ideas and the type of texture I create with my idea, right? So if I was going to be doing, what would red work well for? Some type of brick wall, I wouldn't probably be doing it like this because this doesn't really look like a brick wall texture. But if I was doing something with, like, I wanted to add an orange sort of feeling into a tree somewhere, or a sunset, or water maybe, like the sun reflecting into the water. Now this might begin to be a good way to do it. Okay, does that make sense? So think about what you're trying to accomplish with it. So that's dry brushing, that's Q-tips. Now you can also do some fun stuff with a comb or a palette knife. And you have to have a thicker amount of paint on there to do that. But it'll work really well. I'm putting some thick paint, pretty thick amount of paint on there. There's different type of palette knives you can get. Some of them different shapes help for certain things. But I'm putting this on pretty thick, and that'll give an actual texture to it as well. Not just the idea of it because it's actually thick, right? So you could play with that type of thing. Once it dries, it'll still have ridges and things in it. And if you didn't like that, but you wanted something like that, you can get an old comb. It won't be ruined by the process because you can wash it out. And you could actually comb through it. And it's going to be kind of hard to show you, but hopefully you can see from an angle. There's ridges that show up in it. It's pretty cool. Once it dries, it looks like squares, so that could be really interesting if you want something kind of geometric feeling. There's plenty of ways to do this, and you could do them in conjunction with each other. So say you have this type of thing, and you realize, oh, I don't like it totally, you can come back in and mess with it a little bit, so it's not totally as rigid by, messing up some of the ridges, but keeping a few of them, and that plays against it. Or you could come in and actually do more of a real scratching with the palette knife and taking away, so it'll be a little more aggressive. So you kind of build up layers of texture that way. There we go, I see better that way. Okay, so you want to do this over a whole sheet, or an eighth of a sheet, or a quarter of a sheet, so you have a big swatch. It's like you're making your own swatches of fabric or your own particular papers that you're going to use to cut out and make the collages with. So the thinner paper is going to work better because you can cut it out more easily and glue it down. If you're like totally against this and you want to go straight to the Bristol and do it directly on there, you can, but it's going to be a lot more difficult. So this is the texture sheets. I'm going to do another video where I show you how to mix, or at least I won't do the whole thing, but most of it, the color scale. So I'll see you in another video in just a moment.